See that metallic gray Range Rover sitting perfectly center mass in my old pond basin? Yeah, that's Ronnie's, Veronica Sterling, the queen of Stonegate HOA. And she isn't leaving until she pays about 4 times what that luxury SUV is worth to get it out. She thought she could block my emergency cattle access just because she wanted to cut 4 miles off her daily commute, using my private land like it was some kind of suburban shortcut. So, I used my antique logging crane, a little bit of physics, and a whole lot of cold, quiet resolve to give her the most expensive parking spot she'll ever have. And the best part? I didn't scratch the paint, I didn't break a single rule, and I have the timestamp footage to prove it. That was the moment it all crystallized, that sharp, satisfying feeling of the puzzle finally clicking shut. But you can't understand the perfect geometry of that outcome unless you know exactly where the cracks first appeared. And believe me, they started long before I ever swung a steel cable near her precious Rover. My story starts like a lot of people's do, with a burnout. 22 years I spent in Manhattan, chasing markets, chasing deadlines, chasing a corner office I realized I didn't even want anymore. I was a senior financial analyst, and the job wasn't just stressful, it was eroding. It ate away at the edges of my personality until all that was left was a guy who woke up tired and went to bed tired, dreaming in spreadsheets. It was worse than stress, it was intellectual entropy. I'd sit in conference rooms smelling stale coffee and regret, watching the minutes tick by on a phone that never stopped buzzing, realizing my hands hadn't touched anything real in decades. My whole life was measured in abstract numbers on a screen. I remember the day I quit. I was staring at a client portfolio review, a column of zeros so long it felt like it blocked out the sun, and I realized I hadn't felt the sun on my face that week. So I sold everything. My condo, the suits, the stress, gone. And I bought the Haven, a 100-acre slice of heaven here in the foothills of Colorado, far from any HOA, any city council, any rule made by a person holding a clipboard. I didn't just want a new job. I wanted a life where my problems were physical, a broken fence, not a broken Q3 forecast. That first morning here, I stood on the porch, smelling pine and damp earth, listening to the silence. It wasn't the dead silence of the country. It was a layered soundscape, the whisper of the creek, the distant lowing of a neighbor's cattle, the subtle creak of the porch swing. It wasn't empty, it was full of life, full of possibility. I started a small, regenerative cattle operation, grass-fed, low-stress, good work. For the first time in my life, my hands were rougher than my chest was hollow. I was free, or so I thought. Trouble, true trouble, doesn't usually arrive with a gunshot. It arrives with a gentle, persistent hum. That hum belonged to Ronnie Sterling's metallic gray Range Rover Sport, pulling smoothly onto my dedicated field access road, a private, gravel track I call the utility cut. It was clearly marked private access, but of course, signs only apply to people who believe in boundaries. She stopped, not on the shoulder, but right in the dead center of the track, perfectly angled to look like she was posing for an automotive catalog. I walked up slow, hands in my pockets, trying to maintain the calm I'd worked 20 years to achieve. I wasn't wearing my city armor anymore. I was just a man in worn jeans and a flannel shirt, asking a polite question. "Morning," I said, polite as can be. "Can I help you? This is private land." She didn't lower her designer sunglasses, just tilted her head. That classic, minimal movement of a person who finds your mere presence an inconvenience. "I'm fine, thanks. Just utilizing the access path. The service is better here, and honestly, the main road is so ugly this time of year." She emphasized ugly like it was immoral. Failing. Her car was idling, burning my diesel, cooling her perfect skin, all because the visuals on the highway weren't up to her standards. I kept my voice low and even. "There's no access path here, ma'am. This is my property. I have equipment and livestock that use this track." That's when she finally dropped the glasses an inch, giving me the full, condescending glare. "Oh, you must be new. The developer specifically set this aside as a historical utility path for Stonegate residents. It shaves 4 miles off my commute to the club. Don't worry, you'll figure it out." And just like that, she waved me off, dismissing me on my own land, and went back to scrolling her phone. That word, new, it hit me right in the gut. I'd poured my soul into this place, learned the soil, fixed the fences, and this woman, who moved into a cookie-cutter subdivision 6 years ago, was calling me new. It wasn't about the car, it was about the claim. She wasn't asking, she was declaring ownership over a piece of my peace. She treated the physical borders of my land like a soft, blurry line on a subdivision map, a minor detail beneath her notice. I knew right then, with a sinking feeling, that this wasn't going to be a polite conversation, it was going to be a war of attrition. She came back, of course, not once, but twice a week, and always in the same spot, right at the neck of my field chute, the temporary gate I used to funnel the herd in or out of the far pasture. It was blatant. It was premeditated. One morning, I even found her sitting in her fully reclined seat, sipping a matcha latte, wearing a sleep mask, with the AC blasting, using my shade tree like it was a high-end beach cabana. She was listening to some soft, ambient spa music that felt painfully out of place against the backdrop of honest dirt and grazing animals. "Ronnie," I said, using her name deliberately, "you have to stop parking here. I'm moving the herd this week, and if you block the chute, it's a disaster." She pulled the sleep mask up just enough to expose one perfectly arched eyebrow. "Calvin, darling, I told you, this is a community right-of-way. The HOA has a letter on file somewhere. You can't just obstruct public access for cows." She pronounced cows with such disdain, you'd think they were carrying communicable diseases. "I'm actually preparing notes for the Architecture Review Board meeting," she said once, puffing up her chest. "These are important community matters, unlike your field maintenance. There is no letter, there is no right-of-way, and these are my prize Herefords, not just cows. They are my livelihood." She gave a sigh so dramatic it could win an Oscar. "Look, I have a very important Zoom call in 20 minutes. Don't make things difficult." That was her go-to word, difficult. It wasn't a threat, it was a guarantee. A promise that if I didn't bend to her entitlement, she would simply apply her HOA-backed force until I broke. I walked away, fuming, but still holding onto the last sliver of my city boy patience. I told myself to document, to be the bigger person, to let the law handle it. But deep down, I knew law wasn't going to fix this. I needed something that would fundamentally change the geometry of her reality. The true tipping point arrived, as most serious crises do, with the weather. It was late afternoon, and the air was thin, carrying the metallic smell of an approaching cold front. A sudden, deep dip in temperature we call a blue norther out here. The kind of storm that dumps 6 inches of snow in 4 hours. The wind was starting to pick up, winding through the fence wires, and the light had turned that strange, dull copper color you see right before a system breaks. I was tracking the forecast and realized I had a 2-hour window to move the entire herd from the low fields into the main barn. Anything less, and I risked losing calves to the cold shock. Losing a calf isn't just financial, it's a gut punch. It's failure. I jumped in the truck, raced toward the field chute, and stopped dead. There it was. Ronnie's Range Rover, not just parked, but angled diagonally across the entire opening of the chute, effectively creating a metal wall. She was in the driver's seat, reclined, headset on, talking animatedly into the microphone, clearly in the middle of a high-stakes HOA video meeting. She was holding court, demanding punitive action against someone else for having the wrong color mulch, oblivious to the impending disaster she was creating. I threw the truck into park and ran up to her window, hands pounding on the glass, the frantic drumbeat of a man facing disaster. She finally lowered the window about an inch. "I am on a call, Calvin," she snapped, radiating pure ice. "Ronnie, I have a blue norther coming. I need to move the herd now, through this gate. People could die." I shouted. Exaggerated, maybe, but the threat was real. She took a calculated breath, her eyes flicking past me to the darkening, steel blue sky. "Well, perhaps you should consider what an eyesore your emergency gate is to the community, darling. I'm waiting for the landscape committee to arrive and survey your unauthorized fencing. I won't move until they get here." I stared at her, utterly hollowed out. I could hear the wind picking up, whistling a warning through the trees. "You are blocking life and death right now, Ronnie. These animals, my life, are in danger because of your vanity." She leaned back in her seat, that smug, untouchable look settling on her face like a mask. "Sounds like a you problem, farmer. Maybe you should have paved your road like a civilized community." Then, without a flicker of remorse, she rolled the window up, locked the doors with a loud thunk, and returned to her meeting, leaving me standing alone as the first flakes of freezing rain began to fall. The last thing I saw was the blue light of her iPad reflecting in her perfect, indifferent eyes. I couldn't waste another second arguing with entitlement wrapped in chrome. I had to use the old, washed-out back trail, a dangerous route filled with debris. The wind was whipping snow now, visibility dropping fast. The cattle were stressed, moving against the wind, their breath steaming in the brutal air. In the frantic rush, one of my lead heifers, a beautiful 2-year-old named Grace, slipped on a patch of slick slate, slamming her knee against a rock. She limped, thankfully, but the sound of that impact, a dull, heavy thwack, was the sound of something inside me snapping. The moment I saw her wince, the cold, heavy anger I'd been suppressing finally solidified. It was no longer about a parking spot. Ronnie hadn't just blocked a road. She had actively, joyfully, caused damage for a moment of self-important control. That injury, inflicted by her sheer, selfish refusal to move, felt like a personal attack on everything I had worked to build. That night, after I'd bedded down the limping heifer, applied liniment, and checked her fever for the 3rd time, I didn't sleep. I sat in my workshop, tracing the perimeter of my land on a plat map, and I called my lawyer, Jim. Jim confirmed the truth. No easement, Calvin. 0. She's trespassing every time. And what she did with that heifer, that's reckless endangerment, bordering on criminal property damage. And how do I stop her, Jim? He sighed. You can get an injunction, but it takes weeks. You need to do something drastic, but legal. Something that forces her to play by the rules she thinks don't apply to her. A lawsuit is a long game, Calvin. You need to make a statement now. Jim stressed that any action I took had to be surgically precise. No damage, no emotion, just a purely mechanical enforcement of my property rights. And that's when the idea hit me. Not an angry reaction, but a brilliant piece of engineering, an ultimate expression of my ownership. I walked out to my side yard, where my massive, antique logging crane, a beautiful, rusty beast I call the Beast, sat waiting. It's a 1940s-era diesel machine, all exposed gears and heavy steel, looking like something left behind by an ancient god. It was a tangible, honest reminder of what real work looked like. The Beast was designed to lift 15,000 pounds of old-growth timber. A 5,000-pound Range Rover? That was a feather. I knew the Beast wouldn't flinch, and neither would I. The next morning, the air was crisp, the sky was a perfect, innocent blue, and the threat of the storm had passed. And right on schedule, at 10:15 a.m., Ronnie came back. She brought the HOA cavalry, 3 other committee members, clipboard lady, golf shirt guy, and the lawyer wannabe, filming on his phone. They were all dressed in their weekend athleisure wear, looking less like community leaders and more like a poorly organized golf outing. They marched onto my property like it was the site of a Revolutionary War battle. Marcus, Ronnie declared, using the wrong name for the 10th time. We are here to document your continued obstruction. We have filed an emergency declaration. If you don't remove your vehicles from the access path, we are suing the farm. I just leaned against my old Ford truck, drinking coffee. I don't have any vehicles on the access path, Ronnie. Don't play games. We saw your tractor here yesterday, and we need to establish the status quo. Now, I'm leaving my vehicle here as evidence. This is now a crime scene. If anyone touches my Range Rover, I'll have you arrested for grand larceny and vandalism. She was theatrical, pointing a dramatic finger at me. Her entire entourage nodded in unison, clearly believing the mere threat of a lawsuit was enough to make me fold. The clipboard lady chimed in. Yes, Ronnie, leave it. We need the court to see the obstruction. It's crucial evidence. Ronnie smiled, triumphant, the kind of smile that says she's already won. She grabbed her purse, locked the Rover with that obnoxious double beep, and climbed into the golf shirt guy's sedan. As they drove away, the last thing she shouted was, "Don't you dare touch it." It was a command, a guarantee that her power would remain even when her presence was gone. And that was it. The perfect, legally flawless setup. She had voluntarily abandoned a vehicle on my private property, blocking an emergency route, and explicitly told me not to touch it. She assumed the threat of a lawsuit would paralyze me. She was wrong. She didn't say I couldn't relocate it. I waited until their dust settled. Then, I clipped my body camera on and started the process. I didn't rush. I moved like a surgeon. I grabbed my gear, 2 padded axle slings, rated for military recovery, soft, wide, engineered not to pinch or scratch. I spent 20 minutes underneath her rover, securing the slings perfectly around the main frame mounts, the parts designed to handle towing. I made sure there was absolutely no contact with paint, trim, or exhaust. Every knot, every buckle was checked twice. I was building an ironclad defense, one sling at a time. I walked over to the beast, my monstrous logging crane, fired up the engine, which sounded like an old bull clearing its throat, and gently swung the boom into place. The smell of hot diesel and old grease was a comforting, familiar scent of honest labor. Using the crane's incredible stability and millimeter-perfect hydraulics, I slowly, smoothly took the tension. The Range Rover's suspension stretched, and then, with a soft, final sigh, the 5,000-pound SUV was lifted, suspended, absolutely straight, and perfectly unharmed. It rose silently, like a fancy, expensive ghost being pulled heavenward, the tires spinning uselessly a few feet above the dirt. I didn't just move it 10 feet. I aimed higher. I aimed for the one spot on my property where it was legally impossible to retrieve without specialized equipment. The center of the empty, fenced-off pond basin, about 50 feet away, requiring the car to be hoisted clear over the corner of my hay barn. I filmed the entire journey. The beast moved with slow, dignified precision, lifting the Range Rover over the barn roof like it was delivering a package. The shadow of the Range Rover, cast huge by the midday sun, slid across the weathered shingles of the barn. And then, I lowered it. Slowly, gently, down into the mud and dry reeds of the basin, right into the middle of the fenced area. It settled with a soft thud. The only damage was a slight coating of pond mud on the pristine tires. I detached the slings, filmed the undercarriage one last time, spotless, and packed up my gear. The result was pure, beautiful engineering, a $90,000 luxury SUV, completely undamaged, sitting perfectly stuck inside a fenced perimeter, far from any road, needing a $5,000 specialized crane job just to get it back on a flat ground. She told me not to touch it, and I didn't. I simply leveraged it. The next morning was pure cinema. Ronnie showed up with her panicked lawyer and a friend's beat-up sedan, screeching to a halt at the edge of the basin. "What did you do?" she shrieked, pointing at her car, now looking pitifully out of place among the weeds. "You ruined my car. You vandalized it." Sheriff Reyes, God bless that man, arrived almost immediately. He walked to the edge of the pond, looked at the Range Rover, and let out a slow, heavy laugh. He had to cover his mouth with his hand. He walked back to me. "Mr. Hayes," he said, shaking his head, "I have to write a report on this." He pulled out his notebook, his shoulders shaking with silent mirth. "Check the vehicle, Sheriff," I said, hands in my pockets. "No damage. Just relocated abandoned property." He climbed the bank, looked the Rover over, and turned back to a hysterical Ronnie. "Ma'am, the vehicle is unharmed. You voluntarily left it blocking an emergency access point, and Mr. Hayes relocated it to a safe, private, non-road area. You abandoned it. It's no longer his problem." "Arrest him," she screamed. Sheriff Reyes shrugged. "I think you need to call a specialized lifting company, ma'am. That's going to be a custom job." He added, very quietly, "And ma'am, obstructing emergency livestock access is a separate fine we're going to discuss right now." Ronnie tried to go nuclear on social media, of course. She posted a tearful, shaky TikTok about the psychotic farmer who stole and destroyed her vehicle. But I waited until she had racked up 100,000 views, and then I posted my own. One clean, 30-second drone shot of the beast lifting her SUV with zero effort, followed by the final shot of the Range Rover sitting perfectly in the mud. Caption: relocated, not vandalized. Full context in the comments. The internet flipped faster than a pancake on a hot griddle. Karen became a meme overnight. The most popular comments were all about the beast and the sheer precision of the lift. They weren't focused on the drama, they were focused on the engineering. The final scene, though, was the courtroom. Courtrooms always smell the same: old paper, old wood, and the stale air of people waiting for accountability. I walked in with my black binder, photos, blueprints, sheriff's report, and the full, unedited body cam footage. The binder was thick, heavy, the physical weight of the truth. Ronnie showed up, frazzled, with a new, equally stressed lawyer. Judge Calloway, a man who looked perpetually disappointed in humanity, wasted no time. When the judge asked for documentation of the historical access path, Ronnie's lawyer mumbled that it was only a verbal understanding. The judge's look was enough to curdle milk. When the judge saw my footage of her telling me not to touch the car, and the sheriff's report confirming zero damage, it was over. The judge didn't even rule on my property rights. He ruled on her harassment, her recklessness, and her unbelievable arrogance. He fined her for obstructing access, ordered her to pay the full cost of the specialized crane retrieval, and banned her from any HOA leadership position for 5 years. He then explicitly mentioned the sworn testimony regarding the injured heifer, stating that Ronnie's indifference to livestock safety was highly relevant to the matter of reckless conduct. She ruined herself, not me. I drove home that afternoon, and the haven felt perfect again. My heifer, Grace, was grazing gently, her limp almost gone. The Range Rover was finally hauled away, at Ronnie's immense expense. I leaned against my porch post and just watched the fields breathe. I could hear the satisfying, rhythmic sound of the cattle chewing their cud, the sound of peace restored. You know, some people, they only learn when the world finally refuses to bend for them. They only learn when their entitlement meets immovable object, and you have to be the one to provide that object. So, here's my question for you. Was I wrong to take justice into my own hands, even though every step was legally airtight? Should I have wasted months in court while the threat to my farm remained? Or is there a time when a simple, decisive act of physics is the only language a true Karen understands? Let me know your thoughts. Did I go too far, or was this the only way to protect my land? Drop a comment below, like and subscribe, and tell me, what's the craziest HOA story you've ever heard?